I fished Linda Davis's wedding ring out of the toilet at 2:17 in the morning. I remember the exact time because the cold glow of the bathroom light seared the digital clock image into my memory. The ring felt slippery in my hand, and for a second, I just stood there, water dripping from my fingers, staring at the little gold band that was supposed to mean forever. I let the silence of the house wrap around me. The entire place was so still that I could hear my own heartbeat echo in my ears. I didn't speak. I didn't curse. I didn't shout. I just looked at the ring, at how small it was. Funny how something that used to feel powerful and unbreakable could suddenly become this pitiful piece of metal. The smell of bleach and old pipe water filled my nose, and I swallowed back something sour in my throat. We had shared a bed for almost 3 decades, Linda Davis and I. We had a son together, Anthony, who was out in some college dorm this very moment. We had a life. The house, the yard, a half-paid mortgage, the 2 cars, even a dog for a couple of years before it died. And now I was standing in the bathroom at an hour when nobody else was awake, holding a ring that no longer belonged on her finger. I placed it on the edge of the sink. Then I turned off the light and walked out into the hallway. The corridor was dark, and I was trying not to wake Linda. She was in the bedroom, our bedroom, probably still asleep, if she was even able to sleep these days. Her breathing wasn't the same anymore. I remembered when I used to love the sound of her breathing in the night. Now it gave me a different feeling. A twisting in my gut, a slow-burning resentment I fought to keep at bay. I needed air, so I made my way to the living room. The windows were large, tinted just enough that you could look out, but it was tough to look in, especially at night. Outside, the moon was thin, half hidden by the clouds, but the yard was visible enough. The wind gently ruffled the leaves of the old maple tree I'd planted with my dad decades ago. I stood at the glass and breathed out, noticing how quickly my breath fogged up the pain. I hadn't planned to find her ring in the toilet. Actually, I stumbled on that discovery by accident. After all the tension between us, Linda had apparently gone into the bathroom. Tried to flush something, maybe just in frustration, maybe she was done wearing that band, and left it sitting in there like a piece of trash. I can only guess. At this point, everything about her felt like guesswork. I wanted to confront her on the spot. I wanted to tell her, I found your ring where it doesn't belong, just like you found yourself in a bed that wasn't ours. But the words wouldn't come, or maybe I just didn't want to speak them. Yet, instead, I just stared out the window, silent and tired, the way a man gets when he's past the point of raw fury and lands somewhere else, somewhere colder. The truth is, I was humiliated. Linda's betrayal, Linda Davis, my wife, reduced me to a man I barely recognized. A man who rummages through bathrooms at 2 in the morning, pulling wedding rings from a toilet bowl like it's some kind of metaphor for how worthless everything's become. I'm John Davis. I'm 55. I've lived in the same house for the past 22 years, in a suburb outside Cleveland. I work in logistics, arranging freight shipments for a mid-sized company. It's not glamorous, but it paid the bills and let me take care of Linda and our son, Anthony, now off in college. I used to think we were just a normal middle-class family. We had arguments, sure, but that's part of marriage. I believed we were solid in the ways that counted. Then came Daniel Parker, or maybe Linda's restlessness came first, and Daniel was just the next logical step for her. I don't know. The order doesn't matter as much as the result. I discovered the affair 6 weeks ago, but I only got the full truth out of her a few days ago, under pressure. A series of small slips, suspicious receipts, late-night phone calls that abruptly ended when I walked in. The final straw was the day I found a piece of paper in the trash can with "See you soon, goddess" scrawled on it. Not my handwriting, obviously, but the note was signed with Linda's little heart-shaped flourish at the end, something she'd done since we were dating. When I confronted her, at first, she tried to shrug it off. "It's just a friend from the gym," she said. Then I calmly pushed further, asked the right questions, and eventually She broke down. She didn't fall to her knees or sob or anything dramatic. No, it was quieter. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands, and mumbled something about how it just happened. Right. I've come to hate that phrase, because an affair doesn't just happen. People make it happen. She told me his name, Daniel Parker, and how he worked in the sales of sports nutrition. She had met him through the fitness center, where she works as an administrator. That was the day I felt part of my soul leave my body. If you've ever had your entire sense of self hammered into dust in a single moment, you know what I'm talking about. That was a few days ago. Now we're in a different place entirely. My anger has cooled into something sharper, more methodical. I recognized a certain clarity in the days following the confession. I noticed Linda's every reaction. Her body language, the flicker of her eyes when I so much as breathed too close. She was terrified I would explode in a violent rage. Maybe in another life I would have. But now I realized that letting fury run wild was a good way to make myself the villain. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's that real damage is done with calm hands. I started forging the shape of my revenge, the same night she confessed. Linda Davis, my wife, is a few years younger than me. She used to be the life of any party, back when we still went to them. Over the years, she got deeper into fitness and health, especially after our son went off to college. I guess it gave her a sense of purpose. She was always reading about diets, new exercise programs, that kind of stuff. To me, it felt a bit obsessive, but I tried to be supportive. Daniel Parker is around 46, apparently. Tall, athletic, the kind of guy who can sell you protein shakes just by flexing a bicep and smiling that I have all the answers grin. From what Linda told me, he's the type who enjoys playing fast and loose with relationships. He compliments women easily, touches them on the arm while talking. Linda admitted she was flattered by the attention. She said she felt alive again, like she was missing something here at home. That's how it always starts, doesn't it? That creeping sense of discontent, the longing for something new. I'd seen it in plenty of other families. I just never thought I'd see it in mine. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That same morning, ring still dripping in the sink, I decided to put a plan in motion. I told Linda just a couple of days before that I wanted to work on us, and she seemed tentatively relieved I wasn't leaving. But in truth, I just wanted her to think I was stepping in closer. I needed her to believe that I was playing the role of the good husband, hurt but willing to forgive. Sometimes forgiveness is the rope you hand to a traitor so they can hang themselves. By the time the sun came up, I was already making breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, the usual. Linda walked into the kitchen in her robe, hair damp from a shower, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. She looked at me warily, as if expecting me to lash out about the ring. She had to know I'd found it. She glanced at my hands, as if searching for some sign I was going to throw the ring in her face. Instead, I just motioned for her to sit down. "Hungry?" I asked. My voice was steady. She nodded, still standing. "John," she began. I cut her off with a look. Not an angry glare, just a calm, level stare. "Eat." I placed the plate in front of her and stepped away. She stared at the eggs like she wasn't sure if it was food or poison. Eventually, she spoke again, quietly. "I'm sorry about last night." She didn't specify the ring, but we both knew that's what she meant. I said nothing. I just shrugged and handed her the salt. She salted her eggs, took a small bite, and I could see the tension in the set of her shoulders. A part of me almost felt pity. Another part felt satisfaction. I let that satisfaction simmer in my gut, because I knew it was only the beginning of what I had planned. She tried again to gauge my temperature. Are we okay?" she asked softly. I kept my face neutral. "We'll be okay," I said softly enough to sound almost kind. "We're going to get through this, Linda Davis." She flinched a little when I used her full name, as if I'd turned her identity into a formal label. I didn't call her Lindy or Honey or any of those old endearments. I wanted that subtle distance to dig in. She picked at her plate, forced down a few bites, and then excused herself to go get dressed for work. I watched her disappear down the hall. It was at that moment I realized how easy it was to slip into this new, calculating role. I'd always been the dependable one, the stable husband who rarely raised his voice. Now I found a different strength. Quiet, deliberate retribution. Work that day was a blur. I sat in my office, going through shipping manifests, reviewing schedules, talking to clients. I answered phone calls, tapped at the computer, nodded at a few coworkers who had no idea that my entire world was in flames. Meanwhile, I planned. I thought about how to tighten the net around Linda, how to make her wonder what was going on in my head. She was bound to see Daniel Parker at the fitness center. Maybe she'd already seen him that morning. Part of me raged at the idea that they were in the same building, possibly talking or smiling at each other. But I forced that feeling down, let it mutate into something colder. Anger that hot is draining. It'll burn itself out. Cold anger, though, that'll keep. I took my lunch break alone, eating at my desk. Then I called Linda's parents. They live a couple states away, but we've always had a decent relationship, or so I thought. Her father, Walter, answered. I'd never told them about the affair. Now I wanted them to know, and I wanted Linda to hear me tell them. It was a precise piece of strategy. Walter answered with a friendly, "Well, hey there, John. How's everything?" He always had that boisterous way of talking, as though the world was a simpler place. I felt a pang of guilt, but it was overshadowed by a sense of necessity. So I asked if Linda was around, told him I'd like to speak to both him and her mother, Charlotte. I said I'd call back in the evening when Linda could be present too, because there's something we'd like to share. He didn't ask too many questions. He just sounded curious. I hung up, my heart pounding. It was a big step. Linda had no idea I was planning to bring her parents into this, but I wanted them to see the cracks in their daughter's marriage with their own eyes, and I wanted Linda to feel that humiliation, because for me, that humiliation was already a daily companion. By the time I left work and got home, Linda was there ahead of me, folding laundry. The house was clean, almost unnervingly so, like she'd spent hours trying to cleanse the place of her guilt. I smelled lemon cleaner. She looked up when I walked in, forced a half smile. "Hi," she said, her voice soft. "Hi," I replied, setting my keys down. I could see her brace herself for something. "Is Anthony okay?" she asked, as though searching for small talk. I nodded. "Haven't heard otherwise. He texted me last week about some exam, but you know how college kids are. Don't worry, he's fine." Silence. She put down the laundry, rubbed her hands together, then tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. I was thinking, maybe we could go out for dinner this weekend. Just the two of us. Talk things through. Sort out everything. She waited for my answer, eyes flicking from me to the floor. "Sure," I said, "but let's do it after we have a phone call with your parents tomorrow. I already set it up." Her expression changed, confusion mixed with unease. "My parents? Why?" "We should have a conversation with them," I said, letting that sink in. "It's important. I want them to know what's going on, and I want them to hear it from us." Her jaw tightened. "John, I don't think." I raised my hand, a simple gesture to stop her. "Linda Davis, we'll talk more about it tomorrow. For now, let's just call it a day." She watched me walk to the bedroom, wanting to protest but choosing not to. I felt a momentary pang of something that used to be love. The memory of how I used to treasure her presence, her laughter. I shoved that memory down. Right now, the mission was to dismantle everything she thought she'd secured. That evening, I barely spoke. I went through the motions, watched TV, drank a single beer. Linda tried to engage me in conversation a couple of times, but all she got were brief replies. Eventually, she gave up and went to bed. I didn't follow until almost 2 in the morning, by which point she was either asleep or doing a good job faking it. I lay down on my side of the bed, listening to the faint hum of the ceiling fan. I remembered the day we bought this bed, 15 years ago, in some big furniture store. We'd tested a bunch of mattresses together. We'd laughed. I'd squeezed her hand, and she'd told me she loved me. It felt like yesterday. Now, the bed felt foreign. I was stiff, sleepless. My mind flicked back to Daniel Parker. I wondered if Linda was thinking about him. I wondered if they'd had some quick tryst that day. My jaw clenched. I had to distract myself, so I stared at the ceiling, inhaling slowly, counting the seconds between each breath, forcing my body to relax. Eventually, I drifted off, the night wrapping itself around my tension like a heavy blanket. The next day, Linda and I prepared for the phone call. I suggested we put it on speaker so we could both talk to her parents at once. She was obviously nervous. She tried to suggest we leave out certain details, but I insisted we speak plainly. I said, no, they need to hear the truth. Linda Davis. When Walter and Charlotte picked up, Linda forced a bright greeting, but I could hear the quaver in her voice. Walter was cheerful, as always, and Charlotte was polite in that gentle way mothers can be. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. I spoke first. Walter, Charlotte, we wanted to let you know about a situation here. Linda shot me a warning look, but I ignored it. There's been an affair, I said calmly. Linda's been seeing another man. Silence. The phone line crackled, or maybe it was just the static of tension in the air. Then Charlotte's voice, trembling, said, Linda, sweetie, what is he talking about? Linda swallowed. Mom, it's complicated. We've been going through a rough patch and I made some mistakes. Big mistakes. She stumbled through the words. Walter cut in. How long has this been going on? She couldn't answer, so I did. Long enough, I said. She met him at her fitness center. They'd been together behind my back. I glanced at Linda, who stared at me with something between rage and despair. Charlotte started crying softly. Walter tried to comfort her over the phone. Linda just sat there with her head bowed, tears running silently down her cheeks. I felt a measure of cruel satisfaction. Linda Davis, exposed before the people who always thought she was perfect. Walter cleared his throat. John, you two have been married so many years. We never saw this coming. Linda, how could you? She choked out. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't explain it in a way that makes sense. I cut in again. We're working on it, I said. Or at least that's what Linda and I decided. Right, Linda? She nodded stiffly. Yes, we're trying. The word felt hollow. Walter, still reeling, said, Is there anything we can do? I let that question hang. Then I said, Just wanted you to know the truth. We'll figure out the rest. But if you ever wonder why I'm distant, or if something changes, I don't want you to be in the dark. Linda pressed her lips together. Charlotte was too upset to say much, only murmuring that she hoped we could work it out. Walter kept clearing his throat, like he didn't know how to respond. Eventually, they said goodbye, and the call ended on a note of stunned sorrow. Linda stared at the blank phone screen, tears streaking her cheeks. That was so cruel, she whispered. I shrugged. I told you I wanted them to know. Or were you hoping you could bury this? She glared at me, wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I never wanted them to see us like this, John. I never wanted to find you in another man's bed. I said coolly. Yet, here we are. She didn't argue. She just stood and walked away, her shoulders slumped, heading for the bedroom. I waited until I heard the door close before letting out a long exhale. My hands trembled slightly with adrenaline. The show had begun. When Linda left for work, I rummaged around in the trash can. She'd thrown away a half-crumpled note from Daniel Parker. It read, Thanks for last night, followed by some smiley face. Subtle, right? My stomach twisted, but I felt a warped sense of relief. She was leaving me little clues, or maybe I was just good at finding them. I pocketed the note and left for my own job. Days passed. I started stepping up my kindness routine, bringing Linda flowers, cooking dinner, acting more affectionate. She was noticeably on edge, unable to reconcile my calmness with her guilt. She'd look at me over the dinner table, her eyes confused, as if waiting for me to snap. I'd smile back, gently ask about her day, watch her squirm in her seat. Sometimes she'd try to apologize again, or ask if we could talk. I'd brush it off, telling her, "It's okay, Linda Davis. I forgive you." But I didn't forgive her. I was simply offering her enough rope. The confession about the affair itself had come during a confrontation one night in our living room, a couple weeks prior. I remember how I cornered her with each piece of evidence: the suspicious text messages she tried to hide, the receipt from a hotel outside of town. Her face went pale. She eventually broke down and admitted everything. She even mentioned some erotic details in a moment of twisted honesty, as if she needed to purge herself. She described how Daniel's flirting escalated, how they met after her shift, how she felt alive again when his hands were on her. She tried to talk about how it was only a handful of times, as if that made it better. I didn't scream. I listened, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. She was shaking, tears dripping down her cheeks. Finally, she whispered, "I'm sorry." It took all my will not to lash out physically. Not that I've ever been violent toward her, but the images flooding my mind were primal, humiliating, and excruciating to endure. She was basically painting a scene of them in bed, sweaty, moaning. The betrayal stunned my pride as a man. I pictured them together, her wearing the same perfume I bought her last Christmas, the gift that I thought was a sweet gesture. When she finished talking, we sat in silence for a long minute. Then I stood up, walked out to the balcony, and just stared at the night sky. She followed me, put a hand on my shoulder, tried to speak. I turned and looked at her, not with love or hatred, but with a cold emptiness. "Don't ever touch me until I tell you it's okay," I said. She drew back as if I'd struck her. That was the moment I think she realized I wasn't going to be the shattered husband who begs for scraps of affection. She found out I could be something else entirely, someone she couldn't predict. The test results came a few weeks after that confrontation. We'd had some questions about paternity, though it was more a paranoid move on my part than anything grounded in actual suspicion regarding Anthony. But I insisted on a DNA test. She said it was unnecessary, but I needed certainty. Turned out Anthony was mine. No surprise, given the timeline of the affair. But still, seeing the confirmation on paper gave me a bitter sense of vindication. I left the envelope in her jewelry drawer, tucked next to a pair of earrings her mother gave her. I didn't say a word, just let her find it. She approached me later, tears in her eyes, asking if I was mad that she'd forced me into that kind of doubt. "You must hate me," she said. I shook my head slowly. "No," I replied. "I don't hate you, Linda Davis. I forgive you." She closed her eyes in relief, tears falling. I placed a hand on hers, let it linger. She grasped at that thread of hope. If only she knew the full depth of my plan. I started noticing how she didn't wear her wedding ring as often. Maybe it was shame, or maybe it reminded her of the vow she'd broken. One day, I confronted her about it, casually. "Aren't you missing something?" I asked. She froze, looking down at her bare finger. I don't feel like I deserve to wear it," she said quietly. I nodded, as though that made perfect sense. I stepped closer, cupped her chin in my hand, and whispered, "Wear it, or don't. Doesn't matter to me anymore." She looked up at me, searching for any sign of love or condemnation, but all she found was emptiness. I could see the chill that ran down her spine. It was more satisfying than I cared to admit. About a week later, I decided it was time for the next stage. I wanted to confront Daniel Parker, not in a violent or public showdown, but in a controlled setting. I found out he'd be at a local fitness expo one weekend, representing his sports nutrition brand. Linda was supposed to help at the booth, something she'd agreed to before everything came to light. She told me she was going to back out, but I urged her to go. I said I wanted us to be normal again, pretend we're just a couple that overcame a bump in the road. That's what I told her. So she went. And I followed discreetly. She didn't see me as I walked through the convention center, scanning the booths for Daniel Parker's face. When I found him, he was standing behind a table covered in protein powders, energy bars, and flashy promotional items. Tall, fit, handsome in that typical gym bro sense. I stood a few yards away, observing him and Linda. She wore her usual work attire, friendly but professional, handing out flyers to passersby. After about 20 minutes, Linda stepped away from the booth, maybe to go to the restroom or get a coffee. That left Daniel by himself. I seized the moment and approached. He greeted me with a salesman's grin, ready to pitch me the wonders of his product. Then recognition dawned in his eyes as he looked at my face. "You're John, right?" he said, his tone uncertain. "Linda's husband." I nodded. "We need to talk," I said simply. He cleared his throat, glanced around to see if Linda was watching. She was out of sight. "Look, man," he began. It's complicated. Maybe we should." I cut him off. "It's over," I said. "You understand that, right? You had your fun. You're done." His face reddened. He started to protest, but I stepped in closer, keeping my voice low and measured. "Don't speak. Just listen. I don't care what you've been telling yourself. It's done. If you see her again outside of this expo, or if you so much as send her a suggestive text, you'll regret it." Daniel swallowed, looking around to see if anyone was overhearing. Then he said, "Are you threatening me?" I smiled, or at least tried to. "No," I said calmly. "I'm just telling you what's going to happen next. If you cross that line again, I will make sure your business contacts know you can't keep your personal life out of your professional relationships. I might also let a few people know about certain questionable activities of yours. I've got enough resources to find details you'd prefer remain hidden. Understand?" He stared at me, lips parted, as if he wanted to protest. But he saw something in my eyes, maybe the same coldness Linda saw, and he decided to keep quiet. He nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Good," I said, stepping back. "Now go sell your powders. And if Linda steps away from you at any point, don't follow her. Don't try to corner her. You don't want me making a scene here. Believe me." He nodded again, swallowing hard. Then I turned and walked away. My heart was hammering in my chest, but outwardly, I kept my composure. That was enough for me. I didn't need a brawl. I needed him to feel how precarious his position had become. I found a spot across the room, behind a large cutout advertisement, and watched Linda return to the booth. She didn't see me. She noticed Daniel's face was pale, asked if he was okay. I watched him say something terse. She glanced around, anxious, as though sensing my presence. I smirked, satisfied that my words had landed. Then I slipped out of the expo, got in my car, and drove away. When Linda got home that night, she was on edge. She didn't mention Daniel, and I didn't bring it up. We went through the usual motions: dinner, some half-hearted conversation, then bedtime. But I saw in her eyes that she was unsettled, that she suspected I'd confronted him. I left it there for her to ponder. She tried to break the tension by telling me about the expo, some new fitness trends, interesting people she'd met. I nodded politely. "Did you see Daniel?" I asked casually. She stiffened, looking down at her hands. "He was at the booth. We barely spoke," she said. "He kept his distance." I nodded. "That's good," I murmured. "That's real good." She glanced up at me, confusion etched on her face. I said nothing else, and eventually, she left to take a shower. I went outside to the porch, stood in the cold night air, and let my mind wander. I thought about how thoroughly I'd ensnared Linda in my silence, and how effectively I'd intimidated Daniel. This was the revenge I'd never thought I was capable of. Some men might have demanded a divorce the moment they found out. Others might have turned violent. But I discovered a more controlled cruelty. A part of me wondered if that made me a monster too. In the following weeks, Linda tried to rebuild a semblance of normalcy between us. She'd place her hand on mine during dinner, or ask if I wanted to go to the movies, or if I'd like her to cook my favorite meal. I'd usually say yes, but the enjoyment never quite reached my eyes. I stayed physically present, but emotionally absent. She felt it. She'd see it in the way I'd stare off into space, or the way my responses were clipped and formal. One night, she stood in the doorway while I was watching a baseball game, arms folded. "I miss you," she said quietly. I muted the TV and looked at her. "I'm right here," I responded, expressionless. She came closer, hesitated, then sat beside me. "No, you're not," she whispered, her voice on the edge of tears. "You're in the same room, but you're gone, John Davis. Please, talk to me." I turned to her slowly, letting the pause stretch. Then I said, "Remember the day we got married? How you smiled in every photo. I still have those pictures in a box somewhere. Sometimes I wonder if they're real, or if you were just faking it." She sucked in a shaky breath. "I wasn't faking," she managed. "I loved you. I still." I placed a finger against her lips gently. "Don't," I said. "Don't use that word right now. I don't need you to say it." She blinked back tears. "I'm trying, John. I'm so sorry. I'm willing to do anything to fix this. Please just tell me what to do." I looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Wear your ring. That's all." She nodded, wiped her eyes, and stood up. Before going to bed, she slipped the ring on her finger. I caught the faint glint of gold when she passed by the TV's glow. She was crying silently. Time passed, as it does, in that slow, painful swirl of routine. Every day I was by her side. Every day she was forced to confront the man who no longer offered genuine warmth. Family friends started noticing the strained air between us. They'd ask if we were okay, and I'd reply, "We're fine," with that same controlled neutrality. Linda would nod weakly. Anthony came home for a weekend in the midst of all this. He sensed something was off but didn't push too hard. He'd always been a bit oblivious to tension, or maybe just young enough to chalk it up to typical parent problems. Linda tried to act normal around him, but I could see it cost her. I made sure to stay calm, distant, never giving her a real chance to talk about the affair in front of Anthony. She must have been terrified that I'd slip up and reveal it. I had no intention of doing so. Not yet. Anyway, but in private, I told her, if he ever asks, I'll tell him the truth. It was my subtle threat, a reminder that her secret was still a loaded gun in my pocket. The last act of my plan took shape on a stormy night. Linda and I had been drifting through the house like ghosts. The sky outside was dark, thunder rumbling in the distance. Rain battered the windows. She was in the kitchen, preparing some tea. I stood in the living room, listening to the drops pounding the roof. Suddenly, a surge of clarity hit me. It was time to end this limbo. I walked into the kitchen. She looked up at me, startled. "John." I didn't speak right away. Instead, I reached over, turned off the stove, took the kettle from her hands. Then I grasped her wrist, lightly, but firmly, and led her to the living room. We stood there in the soft glow of a single lamp. She looked both frightened and hopeful. "What is it?" she asked, voice trembling. I glanced at the ring on her finger, the one I'd insisted she wear. "Give it to me," I said. Her eyes widened. "What?" "The ring," I repeated, holding out my hand. She hesitated, then slid it off her finger, placing it in my palm. It felt cold. I studied it for a moment. "So this is what remains of us," I said, more to myself than to her. She swallowed hard. "John, I know you might not believe this, but I've—" "Stop," I said softly, and she did. Thunder boomed outside, rattling the windows. I want you to listen to me very carefully. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not leaving this house. I'm not signing any divorce papers, not now. Because this, I held up the ring, is mine to decide. And I decide when it ends. Her lower lip trembled. Please, John, if this is about punishing me. I leaned closer, my voice a low hiss. Linda Davis, you lost my trust. I carved it out of my chest and threw it away the day I found out what you did with Daniel Parker. I let you live under the same roof, let you keep everything. This home, our son's good opinion, a shred of dignity. That's more than you deserve. She started to cry, her tears mixing with the storm's rhythm. I know, she choked out. I know I messed up. I'm so sorry. I closed my eyes, drawing in a slow breath. And now, I'm done giving you the chance to fix it. There's no fixing it. There's only living with it. I placed the ring on a side table. I'm not wearing one, and neither will you. You can keep living here, keep being a mother to our son. But I'm finished being your husband in any meaningful sense. Understand? She stared at me in raw disbelief. You're going to stay, but not be my husband. Yes, I said, voice cold. Consider it an extended sentence. I'm not freeing you. I'm not giving you the final blow so you can play the victim. I'm here, but I'm absent. She covered her face with her hands, sobbing. That's not a marriage, she whispered. I let out a short, mirthless laugh. It's what we have. And you'll accept it because the alternative is I ruin your life. I'll expose the affair to anyone who matters. I'll let Anthony know exactly why his parents fell apart. I'll bring your parents' disappointment to the surface again and again. You'll lose everything you think you still have left. Is that what you want? She shook her head, trembling. No, she whispered. No, I don't. Then you do as I say, I replied, stepping back. This is the new normal, Linda Davis. Accept it. She sank to her knees on the carpet, crying freely, her shoulders shaking in silent sobs. I stood there, arms at my sides, unmoved by her tears. Outside, the storm howled, rain lashing the windows, lightning flashing across the sky. The tension in the air felt electric, like a live wire. I watched her cry, watched the woman who once meant everything to me reduced to this broken figure on the floor. I felt neither joy nor mercy in that moment. Only a grim sense of finality. This was the fate she chose the day she decided to share herself with Daniel Parker. She ended our marriage, not me. I was simply writing the last lines in a play she authored. The following day, I went through the motions as if nothing had changed. Linda, on the other hand, wandered the house like a wraith. She barely spoke. Once or twice, she tried to meet my eyes, perhaps hoping for a hint of pity. She found none. When Anthony visited a week later, he noticed something was off. But Linda and I performed the usual charade. She cooked dinner. I asked him about his classes. If he sensed the distance between us, he didn't comment. After he left, Linda retreated to her bedroom, which was still technically ours, but I spent most nights on the couch now. And I stayed up, flipping channels on the TV without really watching anything. The next big event was a phone call from Charlotte, Linda's mother. She was checking in after having learned about Linda's affair. Linda took the call in the bedroom, but I hovered near the door, quietly listening. Linda cried into the phone, telling her mother she was so miserable, but it's what I deserve. She didn't mention Daniel Parker by name, only that she'd ended it. Charlotte, ever the gentle soul, tried to console her. Linda ended the conversation with a half-choked, "I love you, Mom," before hanging up. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, she flinched. I didn't say anything. I just stepped past her, heading for the bathroom. She stood in the hallway, hugging herself, looking like she wanted to speak. I closed the bathroom door, shutting her out. Days turned into weeks. My revenge was quiet. No blow-ups, no dramatic fireworks, just a steady, relentless coldness. Occasionally, Linda tried to approach me physically, maybe craving some form of intimacy or comfort. I always brushed her aside. One night, she pushed harder. She cornered me in the hallway, placed her palm on my chest. "I can't live like this," she whispered. "Then don't," I said, stepping back. "Pack up and leave. But remember the fallout you'll face. Ask yourself if you're prepared for it." Tears welled in her eyes. "You've become so cruel," she said, voice trembling. I shrugged. "Maybe. But cruelty feels like justice to me right now." She opened her mouth as if to argue, then closed it again. She turned and walked away, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I watched her go, feeling that same heavy emptiness. Part of me wanted to let it go, just put an end to this tortured existence, and let us both start over somehow. But another part, the part that remembered the humiliating details of her affair, refused to release that anger. So I kept to my path. Eventually, Linda tried therapy, going alone. She asked if I'd join, but I refused. "We're past that," I told her. She started to attend weekly sessions, hoping maybe a professional could help her find a way to cope with my distance or earn my forgiveness. I didn't care. That was her problem. I settled into my routine. Work, errands, occasional beers with a coworker named Bill Thompson, who sensed something was up but didn't pry too deeply. "If you need anything, let me know," he'd say. I'd nod, politely decline any real conversation about my marriage. At home, Linda and I existed like strangers sharing a roof. She looked older by the day, her skin losing its glow, the lines around her eyes deepening. She avoided wearing makeup most of the time, stopped going to yoga classes, let her hair remain unstyled. I recognized that she was slowly unraveling, but I didn't step in to save her. I just watched. One day, I came home from work a bit earlier than usual, and I found her in the backyard, crouched by the flower bed. It was late afternoon. The sun was casting long shadows across the grass. She was pulling weeds, though I could tell she was doing it absent-mindedly, her thoughts elsewhere. I paused by the sliding glass door, observing her for a moment. She wore an old t-shirt and sweatpants. Her hair was tied back in a messy ponytail. Even from a distance, I could see the slump of her shoulders, the blankness in her eyes. A month ago, hell, maybe even a week ago, I would have savored this sight. The wife who wronged me, weighed down by shame. Now, as I watched her, something else flickered in my chest. It wasn't pity, exactly, but a sense of how far we'd fallen. I stepped outside, letting the door close behind me. She turned, startled, and stood up. Dirt stained her knees and hands. I didn't hear you," she said quietly. I nodded, not sure how to break the silence. The air was thick with the heat of the day. A lawnmower droned somewhere in the distance. She glanced at me, then away. I was just. The weeds were getting bad. I looked at the flower bed, noticing how wilted some of the blooms were. We used to tend that garden together, back when we cared about small joys. Now it was as neglected as the rest of our marriage. Linda wiped a strand of hair from her forehead, leaving a streak of dirt across her cheek. "Do you want to talk?" she asked, voice trembling. I parted my lips, intending to deliver another cold retort, but the words stuck. Instead, I just shook my head. "Not right now," I said. Then I turned and went back inside. The tension built steadily. Over the following weeks, the house became stifling, like the walls themselves carried the weight of our unspoken battle. Linda tiptoed around me. I accepted that as part of her penance. She tried, once or twice, to bring up the idea of moving forward, asking if there was a chance we could actually rebuild. Each time, I denied her hope. Why would I want to rebuild a house that's already collapsed? I'd say. She would cry, or stare off blankly, or sometimes lash out in anger. "You're punishing me like you never loved me," she spat once. I just walked away. Eventually, she grew quiet again. She retreated deeper into herself, avoiding direct contact unless necessary. The ring remained off her finger, tossed somewhere. I didn't ask. I didn't care. We lived in that purgatory for months. And then, unexpectedly, something shifted. It was a Saturday morning. I'd been working on the old truck in the driveway, trying to fix a stubborn radiator issue. Sweat poured down my face in the summer heat. Suddenly, Linda emerged from the house. She was dressed neatly, hair brushed, makeup subtle but present. It was the first time I'd seen her put effort into her appearance in a while. She came up to me, shading her eyes from the sun. "I'm going to see Daniel," she said. I nearly dropped my wrench. "What?" She swallowed, eyes darting away. "He called me a few days ago. Said he wanted to apologize, to make amends or something. I told him no at first. But then I thought about it, and I need closure." My jaw tightened, but I tried to keep calm. "And you think that's a good idea?" She nodded, forcing herself to hold my gaze. "I do. I need to face what I did, maybe hear what he has to say, and put an end to it in my own mind." I set the wrench down carefully, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. "Fine," I said. "Do what you need to do." She nodded, a flicker of surprise at my lack of a fight. "Okay," she mumbled. Then she turned and walked to her car, glancing back only once before driving off. I stood there in the driveway, my mind reeling. The nerve of that man, calling my wife after I'd explicitly warned him. I realized he was trying to play the remorseful suitor, seeking forgiveness. Or maybe he wanted to resurrect the affair. The thought made my blood boil. But I didn't chase after her. I just went back to the truck, pretended to focus on the radiator, though my hands shook with anger. Hours passed. The sun reached its peak and started descending. She didn't return until evening, pulling into the driveway just as dusk settled. I looked up from the porch where I'd been nursing a beer, my stomach churning with dread and fury. She got out of the car, face pale. She came up to me slowly, each step weighted. I said nothing, waiting for her to speak. Finally, she mustered some words. "We met at a coffee shop." He apologized. We talked for a while. She paused, fiddling with a button on her blouse. I told him I wouldn't see him again, that it was over for good. I needed to say that to his face. I studied her expression. She seemed raw, emotionally drained, but also resolute. "And how did he take it?" I asked, struggling to keep the venom out of my voice. She shook her head. "He tried to convince me it was a mistake, that we should try again." I said no. I told him I was willing to live with the guilt of what I did, but I'd never be that woman again. I nodded slowly, not entirely sure how to respond. Part of me was seething at Daniel's audacity. Part of me was oddly relieved she'd turned him down. Linda exhaled, her shoulders slumping. "I'm done with him," she whispered. Then she looked at me with a painful sincerity. "But I don't know if you're done punishing me." I let that question hover between us. "That's for me to decide," I said at last. She swallowed, tears glistening in her eyes. "I know." Over the next few days, Linda's demeanor changed. She seemed lighter, even though I was still as cold as ever. I caught glimpses of her smiling to herself, almost as if she let go of some burden. I hated that she seemed to find peace while I still simmered in resentment. One night, she stood in front of me while I was reading the paper. "I wanted to say thank you," she murmured. I glanced up, confused. "For what?" "For letting me talk to Daniel. For not stepping in and stopping me." I set the paper aside. "It wasn't about letting you. You're an adult. You do what you want." She nodded. "I know. But I also know how angry you've been, and you could have made it hard for me." I looked at her for a moment, searching for an angle. "Why'd you really go see him?" She was silent for a long moment, gathering courage. I needed to face the person I'd become. The person who could cheat on her husband and lie about it. And I guess I needed to see him one last time to realize he wasn't worth destroying my life over. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Does that realization make you feel better about yourself?" Her eyes filled with tears. "No," she whispered, "but it means I can finally stop lying to myself. I destroyed our marriage for a thrill that amounted to nothing. I gave up your trust for a stupid fantasy." She paused, her voice trembling. "I don't deserve your forgiveness, John Davis. I never will." I stared at her, feeling a mix of contempt and pity swirling in my chest. "Forgiveness, Linda, isn't the point anymore." She closed her eyes. "Then what is?" I exhaled slowly. "The point is that you have to live with what you did. So do I. And we do it under the same roof, because this marriage is a tomb now. We're entombed together." She started crying softly. I stood, brushed past her. She reached out, just barely touching my arm as I walked away. I didn't shake her off, but I didn't stop either. The following weeks played out in muted tones. We functioned as roommates, exchanging minimal words. She kept the house, made dinners, tended the flower bed. I handled the bills, went to work, occasionally watched a game, or took the truck on a drive. On the surface, we were still John and Linda Davis, married, living in the same house, but the undercurrent of betrayal and punishment remained, unspoken yet always present. Sometimes I caught her looking at me with a strange mixture of longing and dread. I'd return her gaze with empty eyes. My anger had cooled into a hollow acceptance, and I found myself wondering if this was enough. Was I truly content living a half-life in the shadow of her infidelity? Then, one late night, I heard her crying in the bathroom. The door was slightly ajar. The overhead light cast a pale glow on the tile floor. Curiosity pulled me forward, and I stopped in the doorway, seeing her crouched by the toilet, shoulders shaking. She was holding the wedding ring in her hand, the same ring I'd yanked from the toilet bowl months ago. She must have retrieved it from wherever she'd stashed it. She looked up, startled when she noticed me. Her eyes were red, tears streaming down her cheeks. Slowly, she held out the ring to me. "Take it," she whispered. I looked at the ring. Memories flooded back. The day I slipped it on her finger, the way her eyes shone with love. It felt like a different lifetime. "Why?" I asked, my voice flat. She sniffled. "Because it doesn't belong to me anymore. I can't have it. Not after what I did." I stared at the ring, at the raw anguish on her face. My chest tightened, some final piece of my revenge snapping into place. Wasn't this what I wanted? Her complete surrender, her acceptance that she'd forfeited everything. I reached out and took the ring from her trembling hand. For a moment, we both just knelt there, silent. Her tears dripped onto the tile. I could feel the weight of the gold band, small and unassuming, yet carrying a lifetime of broken promises. She swallowed, trying to speak. Finally, she managed, "I'm sorry," her voice cracking with despair. I closed my hand around the ring, stood up slowly. "I know," I said, turning away. When I reached the hallway, I paused. I glanced back at her kneeling form, huddled in the light, sobbing softly. Then I walked on, leaving her there. So that's how it ended, or rather, how it continues. She remains in the house. We haven't divorced. I sleep alone most nights, sometimes in the bed, sometimes on the couch, depending on my mood. She tries to coexist with me, tries to do kind things, but it's hollow now. We don't speak of love. We don't speak of a future. We're just two people bound by the remnants of a life we built, strangled by the affair that unraveled it. I still remember the day I pulled that ring from the toilet, the water dripping off its curve, the sense of finality that hit me in the chest. That was the moment I decided I'd never leave, because leaving would be too merciful. Instead, I'd stay and become the absence inside her life. Let her wake up each day knowing I'm right there, but never truly hers again. It's a slow kind of vengeance, and sometimes, in my darker moments, I wonder if it's also a slow kind of self-destruction. But for now, this is where we are. Linda Davis lives her life, overshadowed by the guilt she can't shake. I, John Davis, haunt the halls like a silent storm cloud, reminding her with every glance that I'm still here and still gone. Maybe one day I'll find it in me to truly walk away or to truly forgive. But that day isn't today. And that's the truth. My truth. I've learned that betrayal cuts deeper than any blade, and the scar doesn't fade easily. So I carry it, like a quiet brand against my soul. Maybe that's what I deserve, or maybe it's what she deserves. Either way, it's what we both have left. And that, in the end, might be the real punishment.